Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 10-Minute Elections. Today is Sunday, January 3rd, 2021, as I hope everyone is having a fantastic new year. I know I've been gone for a while, considering that my last video made it to YouTube last year. No, I won't. But I'm back at it, and this is my state legislature video overviewing how the state legislature elections fared in 2020. Of course, with the presidential, Senate, and House elections on the national level, we also had state legislature elections. Almost every chamber was up for grabs. Not quite. There are some chambers that go up for grabs only in midterm years or otherwise. But you can see my legend here is that a lean color, like you see in Nevada or Utah for Democrat and Republican, that is a hold, and a dark red in the case of New Hampshire means a gain. Republicans gained both chambers there. So a Georgia runoff video will be coming very soon, considering that election is the 6th. Also, one thing to note, the new Congress was sworn in today. Some sparks flew on the House floor, not so much in the Senate, as the Senate 6 new senators were sworn in. So only 2 seat changes to this point, actually, in terms of the swearing-ins today, with John Hickenlooper, the Democrat, replacing Republican Cory Gardner in Colorado. He will become the junior senator from Colorado and make that state's Senate delegation all Democratic, pairing with Michael Bennet, another Senate Democrat. And then in Alabama, Doug Jones's seat is no longer, because that seat went to Tommy Tuberville, who was sworn in earlier today. So he will make that congressional delegation all Republican as well. 4 new senators were sworn in as well. They were all hold. So, in terms of the state legislature elections, Democrats were looking to go on the offensive here. They were looking for pickups in Michigan, in Wisconsin, a hold in Alaska, which I'll get to Alaska. Alaska isn't decided yet. In Arizona, possibly even in Texas, maybe in North Carolina, although this one was always kind of a reach. In Pennsylvania, they were looking to hold on to New Hampshire, and they didn't do any of these. So you'll notice that Republicans will maintain unified control of the state legislature in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Democrats were looking to put a dent in all of these, especially Michigan. Wisconsin is extraordinarily gerrymandered. Wisconsin has the worst, especially on the state level, gerrymanders in the nation, and frankly, a lot of the key laws there allow for a lot of partisanship in measures that aren't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily be partisan, such as extreme redistricting and partisan Supreme Court elections. Democrats were not able to flip the Minnesota Senate. That's another thing they were after. One note, the House of Representatives is going to be the dot, and then the Senate, the state Senate, is going to be the color of most of the states. So, for example, in Minnesota, which has split control, the House of Representatives is Democratic, Farmer, Labor, and the Senate will remain in Republican hands. Nebraska has a unicameral legislation. Unicameral legislature. There is not a state House of Representatives and a state Senate. So Democrats maintained control of most of the houses they had, and I will note that they will not be hit as hard as they were on the 2010 elections. The 2010 midterms were a mess for Democrats. They gave Republicans a whole lot of trifectas, even in blue states, and control over a whole lot of redistricting. But now Democrats at least have the legislatures, and often trifectas in blue states, trifecta obviously being state legislature, state senate, and the governor. But they didn't quite. Democrats did a lot better. They made up a lot of ground really in 2018, but they have not yet drawn even compared to where the nation is politically. The maps at this point in the state legislatures still slightly disproportionately do favor Republicans, and that's just kind of remnants from 2010, that these things do kind of have a lasting effect, because if you gerrymander the maps in 2010, you're probably going to retain control on those gerrymandered maps unless you're in a deep blue or deep red state in 2020. So, and that's really what we're seeing in Wisconsin, that despite Democrats and Republicans drawing roughly even on the popular vote, Republicans are literally just a couple of seats away from a supermajority in the state legislature. So the one legislature that did flip is the state of New Hampshire. Now, in 2016, Republicans won control of both chambers, or they kept control. The state house, state senate, and of course, their governor is Chris Sununu, Chris Sununu, who was just re-elected by a landslide in 2020 over the Senate Majority Leader, or at least he was the Senate Majority Leader. But Republicans actually flipped both houses. They flipped the House roughly on its head, as in the seats that the Democrats had were replaced by the number of seats Republicans had, and the state Senate, they were able to flip just enough seats to gain a majority by a few. So New Hampshire flips again. What I really want to talk about, though, is the fact that this was an election where Democrats were largely regarded to be on the offensive. In a lot of states, and in increasingly more states now, the maps are drawn by nonpartisan commissions or some entity that does not have explicitly partisan goals. That's not the case in states like Wisconsin, in states like North Carolina, although the North Carolina State Supreme Court decision did change that, and it flipped 2 Republican U.S. House seats to Democrat. Basically, safe Republican to safe Democrat, 2 seats. And those were, in fact, 2 of the 3 seats that Democrats flipped in this year's House of Representatives elections, the other one being in Georgia, which Carolyn Bourdeaux flipped from Republican. But Democrats were not able to gain any state houses, and Republicans really weren't necessarily going on the offensive in any state besides New Hampshire, and they did win it. They almost won Maine, but not quite. That one was in Republican hands previously, but flipped Democratic in 2018. New York. So this should be seemingly a safe Democratic state, but Republicans have historically, well, not necessarily historically, but at least over the past decade or so, Republicans have dominated the state Senate in New York. They have, well, okay, I say dominated. I don't really mean dominated, but they have controlled it in a deep, deep blue state, right? So you go back to, I believe it was in the early 2010s, there was sort of a coup, in essence, where the Democrats had a Senate majority, but a caucus of just a few senators broke off, and essentially, in what's largely regarded as a power grab, instated their power than Republican power, and so Republicans held that power despite that Democrats actually had more members of the Senate. Democrats really for this whole time had a Senate majority, quote unquote, but it wasn't really, because you always had this independent Democratic caucus that was always willing to go with Republicans and end up putting Republicans in power. So that dissolved and was really no more, especially after the 2018 midterm elections, where the Democrats gained a massive majority in the state Senate that really no independent Democratic caucus working with Republicans could overcome. And they were looking for a 2/3 majority in the Senate. A 2/3 majority in both houses would have given them sole control over how the maps were drawn, of redistricting and gerrymandering, essentially. That didn't happen. In fact, the Democrats are actually going to lose a few state Senate seats, and the Republicans will have a say in how New York's congressional maps are drawn for the next decade. These congressional maps will take hold in 2012, or I'm sorry, not 2012, 2022 for the midterm elections, and the first presidential election they will take place for is 2024, which is the that'll be the census realignment, right? Where like Texas and Florida gain electoral votes. Rhode Island loses electoral votes, Minnesota loses, Pennsylvania loses, just et cetera, that realignment. And so that's what the new congressional districts will be drawn off of, that states will be notified of how many representatives they're going to get, and that number may go up or down, and then the districts will be drawn accordingly. But I have the Georgia video coming very soon. I know I already did a Georgia video only like a week ago, but I'm going to have another one coming just because that election is Tuesday, January the 5th. All right. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you're interested. And since you made it all the way to the end of the video, the shout out question of the day for a guaranteed shout out in the next video. I promised this in my last video, and here it is. Leave your answer in the comments or DM me on Instagram. I am on there as 10 Minute Elections, all lowercase, all one word, and I really look forward to seeing y'all next time.